Alright, hello and welcome to part 2 of my reading of Not Guilty by BrightBriar, which was requested by the writer themselves, which is awesome that they're listening to this, or that some of the writers themselves are even looking around at their work. But yeah, and if you are watching BrightBriar, that's awesome. Thanks for watching. For the rest of you also, but still. This is good. Okay. Anyways, this is good. This story was going good so far. So at the end of it's a Yugioh fan fiction story. All sorts of stuff going on. A character just died, which is pretty insane. Yeah, I don't even know. All sorts of crazy stuff. Merrick, I think, stole the Millennium items in fear they would get stolen. I don't know. And yeah, maybe I sound better. I wish this mic wasn't as disappointing as it is. I don't know. Maybe I should go back to using only my phone for this because it might be better quality. I have no idea. But yeah, so I got nothing. All I gotta say is just let's get going, I guess. Start doing with chapter 3 or chapter 2 if you count the prologue. This is gonna be very weird that it says chapter 3, chapter 2, whatever. Take flight. Oh my god. You probably can't hear that because I found out that this mic like removes sound that's coming from like elsewhere. Or I don't know, it supposedly does it. But if you hear a phone ringing in the background, that's a phone ringing in the background. But if you can't hear it, then yeah, there you go. Anyways, I'm gonna shut up. I'm not gonna shut up. I'm gonna start reading, and hopefully ignore the phone ringing, because I'm not gonna do anything about it. Although there is a phone doing notifications here. Anyways. Everything was pitch dark, save for the harsh, cold blue light radiating from Merrick's phone as a notification came in. The light from the face-up Samsung Galaxy illuminated the ancient stone walls, revealing worn hieroglyphs, age-old carvings, and unlit torches. Merrick was in the tombs. Home, he supposed, though he didn't feel any fondness for the place. It was simply somewhere he could stay for free in the wake of the museum heist. He had nowhere better to go. I don't know how to do. I assume it's a phone vibrating, but I don't know how to like make that noise. Man, I don't know. Whatever. He jerked awake. His phone was making an unholy, god-awful noise, vibrating on the stone or on the hard stone floor. He winced. That noise, in his opinion, was the closest that humanity could ever get to knowing what hell was like. I'm terrible at it. Merrick frowned as his phone went off a third time, sitting up stiffly. If someone was texting him, it would be Shizu Rashid or Ryu. He didn't have any reason to expect a flood of messages from this from any of them, nor were his emails quite that insistent. In this internet, in this temple or whatever. And then another phone buzz. Wearily, he reached for his phone, swiping it off the floor, and then bringing his arm back under his doona where it was warm and just felt safer. He unlocked his phone, instantly regretting his decision as the light from the screen blinded him. He looked away, getting used to the sudden brightness, then glanced back at it, checking the time, rubbing his eyes. 5:30 a.m. What even? He looked down at his notifications, freezing up. 18-year-old Duel Monsters Tournament semifinalist Kyoru Tanaka dead following duel with Yugioh. Merrick froze, his blood running cold. He suddenly became aware of his heart thudding hard in his chest, pounding against his sternum. He reread the text a few times, realizing it came from the news app. But how? He looked at the next one. The update. Dueling tragedy. Virtual reality too real for Kyoru Tanaka. It's not a virtual reality, it's a simulation, Merrick thought numbly. That was all he could manage to think. More news stories continued to flood in. International Card Watch sent to the graveyard. Come on. The semifinalist dies playing Duel Monsters in Domino City Regional Tournament. Dual News Network. Kyoru Tanaka's life points hit 0. God fucking come on. Permanently DM community in shock following tragedy in Domino City. Half a dozen messages from different news sources whose apps he downloaded, all telling him the same thing. He swiped his finger across the screen, unlocking his phone. 6762 MROD. I don't know. Whatever. He'd said it a long time ago and didn't really think about the word making up the password anymore. Tapping on the notification from Dual News Network, which was, in his opinion, the most reliable source for Duel Monsters related things, the article read. Following an epic showdown between Yugi Muto, the king of games, and Kyoru Tanaka, one of Industrial Illusion's 5 up-and-coming duelists for this year, Tanaka lost not only the duel, but his life. The duel commenced at 11:30 a.m. in Domino City this morning, and ended just after 12 p.m. At this point, Kyoru collapsed. He had already keeled over once in the duel when taking 11,000 points of damage. Merrick's eyes widened. 11,000 points of damage? How even? Doctors were on the scene already in case this first incident was due to a health condition. When the duel ended, by the time we reached him, it was too late. The exact cause of Kyoru's death has not been identified, while doctors on the scene suspect the cause was cardiac arrest. An autopsy has not been concluded. Yugi Muto, immediately following the duel, left the scene quickly, very distressed. Dual News Network got the following statement from him when Kyoru's status was confirmed. I'm not sure why this has happened. It's horrible, and my sincerest sympathy goes to Kyoru's family. It was an honor to duel them. Muto is expected to appear at a press conference tomorrow morning. Merrick stared blankly at the screen, then locked his phone, letting it fall onto the bed with a muffled plop. Cardiac arrest, my ass. The duel had to have been a shadow game. There's no other plausible explanation. Yet all the Millennium items were with him, in Egypt, on a table, just a few feet away. He stared at them for a long time. All 7 were untouched. It had been a week since he'd stolen them from the museum, and since then everything had been quiet. He tried using the rod a few times, and it still responded to him for the most part. Occasionally he would have to put more effort than usual to get to what he wanted, but he hadn't tried controlling a large group of people since the heist, but otherwise everything with it was normal. He'd suspected that with a bit more practice he'd be just as proficient with it as he had been 2 years ago. But that wasn't important right now. He stood up, pacing, running his hands through his silky blonde hair. Someone was dead. Someone had died playing Duel Monsters. For the first time now that he thought about it, he didn't recall that ever happening before. There had been a lot of close calls, but to his knowledge, no fatalities, and Kyoru had been playing Yugi. Could the Pharaoh, Atem, be back? No, surely not. Even if he was, his soul would, in all likelihood, be in the Millennium Puzzle, resting on the table beside him. And even then, why would Atem start a shadow game? Why now? And why him? Why Kyoru Tanaka? It made sense for Yugi to be the target of that kind of attack. Perhaps whoever started the shadow game thought Yugi would lose, but who had the means to do it? How could anyone have started a shadow game while Merrick had all the Millennium items? He froze as one possibly came to him. Someone could have snuck in. His heart racing, he lit a torch, glanced once at the items, and hurtled down the corridor, racing towards the entrance to check for any signs that someone had just strolled into the tombs while he was asleep. Being underground, there was only one entrance and no windows, and as Merrick knew far too well, there was a device near the door like an alarm. If the door was open, it would go off. If someone had come in, then alarm wouldn't be set properly. It had to be manually reset after each time it was sprung. He sprinted through the maze of ancient stones, stopping suddenly at the entrance, a little short of breath. He held his torch closer to the alarm, scrutinizing it for a few moments. It's still set. No one's come in. A much more vibrations in his phone. Merrick frowned, placing the torch in a stand on the wall as his phone buzzed again, multiple times in quick succession. It was a text this time from Ryu. I don't know. From Ryu Bakura, the soft one, apparently. Have you heard? What time is it there? It's really early, isn't it? Oh well, text me when you're up. Merrick replied immediately. Hey, I'm up, I heard. You're. Merrick, oh my god. Did you watch the duel? Yeah, the squad was all there. Squad up. Do you think it was a shadow game? Definitely. What else could it have been? True. Oh my god. I was making sure you knew. Where are the Millennium items? I've got them. I've had them all week. What? Merrick, why didn't you mention this? Ryu, I'm sorry, but like we hadn't talked? Honestly, I just didn't think to let you guys know. I just wanted to keep them safe. They were vulnerable before. I haven't done anything with them. Okay. I'm just checking no one broke into the tombs. So far, it doesn't look like anyone else has used the items. At least no one else entered the tombs this morning. How do you know? There's an alarm thing. It hasn't been set off, so I'm pretty sure no one could have come in. That's good. By the way, where's Yugi right now? Talking to the DCPB, Domino City Police Bureau. They're getting involved? They may not know about shadow magic, but because of Kiro's life points hitting 0 and his death coinciding, they're pretty sure it wasn't just coincidence. They're pretty sure they probably suspect Yugi did something since he was Kiro's opponent, but they have no proof. Yugi won't tell them anything, right, about shadow games? I'm sure he won't. You can just tell them the truth, that he didn't do anything, that he doesn't know anything. It's still odd, though. Wait, if you were there, did it feel like a shadow game? Did things go all dark and voidy? No, it felt like a regular duel. To everyone in the crowd, I can't speak for Yugi, though. Or Kyoru. I'm sorry, I really have to go now. That's okay. Let me know if you learn anything else. Will do. See you. See you. Normally, he'd add a smiley face, but it didn't seem appropriate. Yugioh was the only one of Yugi's old group of friends that he regularly stayed in touch with. The others respected him and saw him as an okay person now, but on the whole they kept their distance. However, Ryu's talk of ghosts and spirits had piqued Merrick's interest. Getting their friendship started a month or so after the Pharaoh's soul returned to the afterlife. They weren't the closest of friends, but they reached a point where a conversation never ran dry or got awkward, which was quite an achievement, considering Merrick had hardly interacted with people his age aside from Ishizu, and Ryu hadn't gotten the opportunity to form meaningful connections and friendships with other people for most of his life, thanks to the Millennium Ring. If Ryu had to rank his friends for whatever reason, Merrick was pretty sure Yugi and Co. would sit at the top, followed by him, but he was fine with that. After all, he had been the one who come up with the plan to stab his arm and get him hospitalized back in the day. They laughed about that, though Ryu would laugh somewhat nervously. Merrick locked his phone, putting it back in his pocket. Grabbing the torch back off the wall and pacing back down the corridor, dissatisfied. He suddenly found that he had a burning desire to know what happened, why Kyoru was dead, and who was to blame. It couldn't be an accident. Merrick had seen too much to believe that Kyoru had just happened to suffer a heart attack as his life points hit 0, which was undoubtedly what the story would be. Kyoru deserved better. He deserved the truth. And Merrick was among the only people truly qualified to look into this. No one else except for his family, the other faction of Tomb Keepers, and maybe Yugi knew as much about Shadow Games and the Millennium Items as he did. If he didn't investigate what really happened to Kyoru, who would? Not the DCPB, even if they were onto the fact that Kyoru's death wasn't an accident, they still didn't have a clue. For the past 2 years, he'd been drifting from place to place, unsure of what to do with himself. Maybe I can do this. And to be honest, from what we were notified of, as in the readers, in the story, the last chapter, it could have been a heart attack, but since Yugi was being affected by it, it wasn't a heart attack. Sorry for doing some laughing there, but these are fake characters. Anyways, I need a drink. But anyways, we still have more of this chapter to go. This chapter's not over. Well, this story is going to be long. 24 hours later, Merrick was on a plane. Ryu had managed to strike a deal with Mokuba Kaiba, of all people. Merrick could stay in an abandoned office while he was in Japan for free, as long as he was investigating into Kyora's death. Mokuba had a rough few months. With Seto in a coma, Merrick suspected this was no ordinary coma, because of course it wasn't, though Mokuba wouldn't give anyone any details. Mokuba had been running Kaiba Corp, which was either completely legal, unlikely, or Kaiba Corp was powerful enough that no one could do anything about it. And the younger Kaiba brother had been doing a good job too, as far as Merrick could tell. Shareholders were happy, and the company continued to turn a formidable profit. But every time Merrick had seen him in news stories and the like, Mokuba's eyes seemed dull and tired. On the outside, he mostly looked like he was doing okay, like he was coping just fine, but Merrick suspected that on the inside, that wasn't the case. Mokuba was just a kid, doing his best to be brave, growing up far too quickly. Merrick never thought he'd feel as though he had anything in common with a child billionaire, never mind something that personal, the need to grow up too fast. For Mokuba's sake, Merrick hoped that Seto would be okay, that he'd come back to them. Boarding had been an ordeal and a half. This was his first time flying. Every other time he'd gone to Japan, he'd gone on a boat. And he had no idea what he was doing. He got up around 1 a.m. in order to make sure he had plenty of time. Then once he'd arrived, he used the rod to get a certain set of gold objects through security, and then spent a solid half hour trying to find the gate. He hadn't thought that the airport would be particularly straightforward to navigate, but he also hadn't expected complete rabbit warren. I don't know what that means. Once he'd found the gate, 2 news agents and 3 new books later, everything had been much smoother. He'd pulled out the book that he'd been particularly keen to dig into, a collection of Norse myths, with one of those dust jackets that felt soft and clay-like at the same time. He was good with Egyptian mythology, but pretty rusty on everything else. It was something he'd been meaning to get onto for a while. So specifically mythology is what he wants to learn, instead of everything. Whatever. Now having boarded, he leaned his head against the side of the plane, staring out the window. Both of the seats next to him were empty, so he'd taken the window seat and was willing to brainwash people in order to keep it, if necessary. Anxiety churned in his stomach, but he forced himself to push it down. Everything will be fine. Most planes don't crash. This is okay. He spent the rest of his time deciding to go to Japan thinking, running potential Millennium Item users through his mind, trying to dissect how Tadako's death or how his murder could have happened. A dozen different scenarios had run through his mind. Some of them involved Pegasus. Some of them involved the Pharaoh. Some of them involved the more demonic version of Bakura. But all of his half-baked theories fell apart if he thought about them for too long. At the end of the day, Merrick had the items. No one had entered the tombs. Nothing made sense. He was pulled from his thoughts as the overhead speakers crackled, an announcement coming through. Ladies and gentlemen, if we could have your attention for a few minutes for the safety demonstration. Merrick sat up straighter, peering over the seats in front of him as a flight attendant appeared in the middle of the aisle, her dark hair in a neat sock bun. As the plane's engines began to hum, the pre-recorded announcement continued while the flight attendant prepared for the demonstration. Every aircraft is different, so we recommend that you listen carefully to the instructions. Today, you're flying on a Boeing 737. Most of the other passengers paid the announcement over the loudspeaker little to no mind, so if you looked bored or exasperated, Merrick glanced between them, bewildered, feeling that the whole thing sounded pretty serious. Even if they've flown before, it literally just said every aircraft was different. What if it crashed and they don't know what to do? I don't know, people are dumb. The announcement went on. The flight attendant seemed to pull a black strap out of nowhere, holding up in the air, taut. For takeoff, please fasten your seatbelt by inserting the clasp into the buckle, then pulling on the strap. You can undo the seatbelt by lifting the flap. Please keep your seatbelt done up during takeoff, landing, and whenever the seatbelt sign is on. We also recommend that you keep your seatbelt fastened whenever seated in case of turbulence or weather conditions. Merrick sat up straight, leaning forward slightly, doing his best to take in all this new information. He'd done his seatbelt already, he was fairly intuitive, but he hadn't noticed this glowing seatbelt sign above him, which seemed pretty important. He swallowed, hoping he hadn't missed anything else. If the air pressure in the cabin changes, oxygen mass will drop from above you. Pull down firmly to activate the flow of oxygen. Put it over your mouth as quickly as possible and then tighten the strap. Oxygen will flow without the bag inflating. Be sure to fit your own mask before helping others. Merrick bit his lips. Slow down. How is this possible for anyone to remember? Yeah, good point. You should also be sure to note that there's a life jacket under your seat or inside your armrest if you're flying first class. Remove the life jacket from your pouch by pulling the tag. Put the life jacket over your head, pass the strap around your waist, clip at the front, and then tighten. On the life jacket, you'll find a red tag and a mouthpiece for inflation, as well as a light and a whistle for attracting attention. Please do not inflate your life jacket until you've left the aircraft. The engine began to hum softly. A higher-pitched whirring could be heard, presumably coming from the propellers on the wings. His heart was thudding hard in his chest, but he forced himself to focus on the safety demonstration as the automated voice plowed on. You should also be familiar with the brace position. Lean forwards, folding your arms on the back of the seat in front of you, and rest your head on your forearm. If you cannot reach the seat in front of you, lean forwards and hold your legs, tucking your chin into your chest. Merrick glanced around him. Are we supposed to practice? I feel like this is an important thing to get right, but no one else is doing it. I guess we'll just die? God damn it, Merrick. You'd think, at some point, he'd be like, God, this boat to Japan from Egypt is taking fucking forever. Anyways. Be sure to know where your nearest exit is. This plane has 8 exits, which the cabin crew will now point out to you. Remember that your nearest exit may be behind you. In the unlikely event that we need to leave the aircraft, the floor will be illuminated with lights directing you towards the exits. Damn right, I'm going to know where the exits are, even if no one else does. Holy Roth, this plane crash is going to be the only survivor. In the unlikely event of an emergency, the crew will operate escape slides and life rafts. If we do need to evacuate, please leave everything that you have brought onto the aircraft behind. Wait, but this phone costs a fortune. It is a federal offense to smoke on this aircraft, including smoking e-cigarettes. This aircraft is fitted with smoke detectors, including in the bathrooms. Then the plane started to move. Something jolted in Merrick's stomach, but it wasn't fear. It was excitement. Unable to help himself, he leaned forward and looked out the window as the aircraft glided along the runway. Leaving the gate behind, he felt the hair on the back of his neck rise. Oh my god, we're actually going to take off. I'm going to be flying in the actual sky. What is happening right now? Oh god. We are now about to take off. Please ensure that your bags are stowed in the overhead lockers or under your seat in front of you, and be sure to turn all electronic devices to flight mode. Make sure that your seat is upright and your tray table is stowed. You don't really need to turn all your devices into airplane mode, or off even. I don't know. As far as I know, I haven't actually flown anything, but what I've heard is that you don't actually need to do that anymore. Okay. Make sure your seat is upright and your tray table is stowed. Thank you for flying with Egyptian Airlines. We hope you have a safe and enjoyable flight. Merrick checked his seat was in the right position, smiling at the flight attendant as she disappeared down the aisle, heading towards the very back of the plane. He reached for the packet of toffee he'd bought in the newsagent earlier. Ryu had warned him that his ears might pop, but chewing something was supposed to help. His heart pounded as he unwrapped it, plane rounding a corner. He pressed his head against the side of the plane, trying to look ahead. The runway stretched out in front of them, and Merrick held his breath, his eyes widening. Horse above were getting off the fucking ground. Oh, God. Then the engine roared to life. The rush of adrenaline surged through his veins, and he suddenly felt lighter. The plane sped up, and he felt himself being pushed back against the seat. Despite the layers of insulation on the plane's hull, the sound of the engines and the tiny wheels flying across the tarmac, he assumed that was what runways were made of, were almost deaf. Fucking. It was almost like white noise, but the volume was turned up too high that he couldn't find the volume button, and he couldn't find the volume button to turn it down again. He gritted his teeth. A lifetime of living underground had made him unaccustomed to loud noises. But despite that, his excitement far outweighed his discomfort. His eyes glowed as their surroundings rushed past, anticipation building in his chest. They then left the ground. Merrick felt shivers all over his arms as the oh my god, and back as the plane began to lift. Noise became less intense, and the wheels finally left the ground, being pulled back into the plane's hull with a gentle whir. He leaned forward, staring out the window, spellbound as the airport got smaller and smaller. The plane turned, the left wing tilting towards the ground, and Merrick gasped as the city opened out beneath him, almost pressing his face against the window. A sea of golden lights glittered against a dark blue-tinted sky, forming an intricate network of streets and highways. The Nile split the city in two, a dark void breaking up the lights of the city. The smoky light dancing on its surface. Cairo was bigger than he could have ever imagined, yet smaller with every passing second. It was beautiful. He suppressed a sound of protest as the plane tilted the other way, the lights disappearing from view. He tried to look out of the windows on the other side of the plane, but the person on the opposite aisle seat was blocking his view. Disappointed, he sat back in his seat, trying to memorize what he'd seen to savor this feeling of wonder. He did a lot of firsts since he'd emerged from the tombs, but this was by far his favorite, his first time on a plane. His anxiety had completely vanished, replaced by a sense of freedom. Never before had he felt this far from the tombs which had been his prison for so long. They were underground below the earth. He was high above them. Night turned to dawn, and dawn turned to day, more quickly than he'd expected. He remembered from being on ships that sailors had to adjust their clocks for the changing time zone as they navigated the ocean, but it wasn't nearly as disorienting as this. Merrick was used to using the sky to tell the time, so to him, time seemed to accelerate as they flew east into the sunrise. Computers showed the time in Cairo and the time in Osaka, but not the time that it technically was at that moment, which was even more disconcerting, because Merrick could sort of tell, and neither of the times on the display matched. Well, obviously. Finally, he reached for his phone and put in his headphones, unable to help staring at the carpet of clouds outside his window in awe. They were fluffier, softer, and whiter than he could have possibly imagined, and he wasn't sure if he'd ever see them like this again. He took a few photos, but his phone couldn't come close to capturing the real thing. He wanted to drink it in as thoroughly as he could, but he never forgot what they looked like. Merrick wasn't sure how much time passed before he felt a tap on his shoulder. Hey, I'm sorry, but I think you're sitting in my seat, 49A. Merrick looked up suddenly, taking his headphones out of his ears. He looked up at the stranger, a tall young woman with tanned skin not unlike his own, as well as dark eyes and long, thick, wavy black hair. She wore a black jumpsuit, the front of which was embroidered with a detailed lioness head. I'm sorry. I think you might have mixed up the seat number, she repeated, looking neither annoyed nor apologetic. 49A is the window seat, not 49C. Merrick blinked and checked his ticket, which was tucked into his seat pocket. He already knew it said 49B, but the stranger didn't know that. He feigned surprise, leaning forward to grab the rod from under his seat, because the window seat was his and this person could deal with it. Oh, sorry, if you wanted me to move, I'll just... No, it's fine, the stranger said smoothly, oozing confidence as she sat down in seat 49B. Her movements fluid and graceful. I don't mind, I just thought I should let you know. Merrick backtracked, surprised, sitting up again. Oh, okay then. I'm surprised she's telling him now that they're, in the sky and not while they're on the ground, but I assume there's going to be some sort of trick. She smiled, arrogant, but not insincere, her eyes glinting. What's your name? Oh, so they were doing this conversation. He blinked. Merrick Ishtar. Ishtar, she mused, smiling again, as though she knew something he didn't. You can call me Astarte. Something about her response struck Merrick as odd, but he couldn't tell whether she was being cryptic or offering him a nickname. Both possibilities were unusual in this situation, but he didn't think much of it. He smiled. Hi. Her eyes glowed. What are you doing in Osaka, then? Is striking up conversation on plane trips something that people normally do? He wondered, responding, I'm not going to Osaka, actually. As soon as the plane lands, I'm catching a train to Domino City. It's fairly small. You probably haven't heard of it. Oh no, I've heard of Domino. That's where Seto Kaiba hosts all of his Duel Monsters tournaments. You know Kaiba? I know of him, she grinned. She said, grinning with her eyes. What are you doing there? Merrick hesitated. Have you heard about Kyoru Tadako? The young woman's eyes darkened. Yes, I did. Are you going to Domino because of him? I'm curious about what happened to him, he said carefully, his guard up, not divulging too much. The more he spoke to Astarte, the more he felt like he was staring into fire. It was fascinating from a distance, but he was wary about getting too close. He liked her, but he didn't trust her. Astarte cocked her head to one side. Did you know him? No, I knew other people who were involved, though. She smiled, almost sadly this time. That's right. Silence hung in between them for a few moments. Merrick narrowed his eyes, almost suspicious. What could she mean by that? Before he could think about it for too long, Astarte spoke again. So why are you investigating into Tanako's death? Merrick paused. Because I don't trust anyone else to do it properly. The DCPB don't know a thing about shadow games, and it should stay that way. God damn it. Anyways, um, I completely missed it. Astarte narrowed her eyes, her gaze becoming more intense, a kind of fire flaring in her dark eyes. But why does it matter? Merrick swallowed, suddenly feeling compelled to be perfectly truthful. The words came out of his mouth before he had the chance to think them through. Tanaka was innocent. He shouldn't have died. If no one finds out the truth as to why, it just wouldn't be right. Sartre considered this for a few moments, then smiled. But not cocky, but not disingenuous. Good talk, Ishtar, she said, grinning to herself as though she'd made some kind of joke that Merrick wasn't in on, standing up and walking back down the aisle, leaving Merrick staring at her, stunned. It suddenly occurred to Merrick that he hadn't noticed her on the plane during takeoff, and he never described his interest in Tadako's death as an investigation, which I don't know if that's Oh yeah, it is weird. Anyways, Merrick arrived in Domino City at 4 p.m. the next day, less jet-lagged than he expected. He only had a small bag of luggage. He'd taken it all on the plane with him in the overhead locker. A little weary, but still fairly alert, he strode into the lobby of Kaiba Corp's tower in the center of the city, fitting since Kaiba Corp is so central to how the city runs. He was greeted by a young boy in a white suit with a wild mass of black hair, and holy shit, that was Mokuba. Merrick hardly recognized him. He felt a pang of sadness for the preteen, not just because he was a preteen, but also, though that was also cause for pity, wondering whether the change in wardrobe was a part of him assuming his new responsibilities with Seto out of action. Mokuba didn't offer him a handshake, probably because the last time they'd seen each other, Merrick hadn't been the most benign or peaceable person. Ryu must be more convincing than I give him credit for, since he's letting me stay here, he thought. Merrick finally broke the awkward, almost stony silence which had settled between them, clearing his throat. Hey, Mokuba hesitated, eyeing him warily. Just so you know, I don't trust you, and I don't like this whole situation. If you cause any damage while you're here, that'll be a personal cost for you to deal with. Merrick smiled gently. I guess he's filling Kaiba's role in more ways than one. Got it. No breaking anything. Look, I know your room's on level 4, and Merrick, he broke off, looking Merrick dead in the eye, though his gaze was bright with humor. If I become some kind of hostage because of all this, I'm blaming you. Merrick grinned. Understood. Accompanied by 2 security guards who were far more intimidating than what should be allowed, even when Merrick had the rod in his hand, they caught the elevator up to the 4th floor. Mokuba led the way down the corridor towards room 414. He unlocked it and tossed Merrick a key. "This one's yours." Merrick nodded, moving past Mokuba, pushing open the door, revealing a simple office. The room was well lit, and there was a simple wooden desk and a wheelie chair in the center with a state-of-the-art desktop computer sitting on it, a myriad of cords plugging into a power board underneath. One wall was lined with empty bookshelves and filing cabinets. Alongside the other was a mattress made up with blankets as well as a large cupboard. A pot plant sat near the large window, and there was a stool in the corner. Merrick smiled. It was completely unlike the tombs. "It's perfect." Mokuba tried not to look too pleased with himself. "Good. There's a bathroom at the end of the hall." "Great." As Merrick pulled his suitcase inside, Mokuba moved back towards the doorway. Merrick swallowed. "Hey, by the way." "Hmm?" The raven-haired CEO stand-in glanced over his shoulder. Merrick hesitated. "Why are you helping me?" Mokuba turned away, breaking Merrick's gaze. Merrick caught a flash of pain in Mokuba's eyes before they disappeared from sight. He was silent for a few moments. Then he spoke, his voice thick with emotion. "Kaoru Tadako had a younger sister." How that matters, I don't know. Okay, so it's been This is gonna be a very long story, so I'm guessing that each of these parts is gonna be like each of these parts of me reading is gonna be like one chapter. So this might take a while, but yeah. So next time won't be this; it'll be something different. But after that, we'll come back with chapter 4/chapter 3 of Not Guilty by BrightBriar. It's looking good so far. I mean, the whole plane thing was maybe a little unnecessary, but I mean, whatever. It was still fine. It was still just kind of like, oh my god, he's never been on a plane before, and all the weird stuff that's happening. I don't know, crazy things going on. Oh my goodness. I want to fall asleep. We gotta end this video. Please end it.